Welcome to PowerPods, our Power Innovation series. In this collection of podcast episodes, you will learn from Hubbell employees that have either created a new product or worked on a product redesign. You will also learn what it takes to take the product to the market and everything that happens behind the scenes.
Welcome to our first episode of our Power Innovation series here at PowerPods. Today here with me is Brad Davis. He's the Business Unit Manager for the Substation and Transmission Connectors. Welcome, Brad Davis. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, glad to be here.
So let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started here at HPS.
Sure. Well, it all started. I went to school at the University of Missouri and received my engineering degree. And while I was interviewing with a variety of different companies, the university asked me to interview with a company named A.B. Chance Company that is in Centralia, Missouri. And after doing that, that organization ends up having everything contained, all the way from engineering to manufacturing, selling, and I was intrigued with the broad array of exposure. And so I started my career off as a product engineer and working on distribution type products, everything from overhead apparatus, switches, protection devices like cutouts, underground switchgear. Migrated into company confidential special projects that got me all kinds of exposure into a lot of different products, and I traveled the world. And after doing that for about 12 years, they asked me if I would expand my horizon and asked me if I would consider learning more about operations. And at that point, they asked me to move to Alabama, Leeds, Alabama, and that's where our connector business unit is. And from there, I spent several years with the operations side, and then I migrated on over to ultimately the role that I'm in now, where I have experience with both engineering, marketing, scheduling, procurement, pretty much everything necessary to be able to run a business inside of a business. And so that's where the business unit manager title comes in.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you've been involved in many different areas. So with that, what has been an innovative product that you helped create?
Well, there's been a number of different things over my 30 years that I've done. And more traditionally, people think about the engineering hard products that you put into your hands. But more recently, we developed it's actually a software. It's called the 3D Portal. And what it is a application that stores electronic 3D models that we've developed within AutoCAD Inventor in a generalized format that various people can use to be able to build their substations and designs out in the utility world.
So while creating this, the 3D portal, who was involved in the development of the product?
Well, to start with, it was my idea, I suppose. I recognize from all this diverse background that I've seen where the 3D models and the inclusion of these types of modeling into designs by various different engineering firms and utilities alike, I could see that that was expanding. And with that, I realized that there was going to be a big need in the future, and the future is now, obviously, to be able to provide those types of products to people to utilize to simplify their lives. So with that, I sat down and came up with a basic idea, and then reached out to our information service team by going through our branding team. With those two organizations, the information team, they have the resources to be able to go through and tell me what was or was not possible with databases and making a web application, and then branding to be able to make sure that this fit the Hubbell vision and where things were going, because this would ultimately need to be integrated into our website. And then obviously I couldn't do any of this without the engineering teams, because the heart and the soul of this is actually having the models themselves to be able to put into this portal. So those were really the entities that were all involved, and we just collectively cultivated this concept from there.
So how much research went into this innovative product?
It's a little bit of a complicated question in the sense that it wasn't like any traditional design of some entity. It was more of a develop as you go. We ended up having, I'd say we had 3 to 4 iterations in developing this program. And that really spanned over 2.5 years in total, and involved having to go through and really get into the weeds of how do these interfaces work, how do typical programs today, how do they go through and collect information to be able to deal with non-disclosure agreements, how do you track personnel, how do you make sure that you have unique identifiers and logins. So it was an evolution more than really going back and doing a lot of research ahead of time to then launch into.
That makes sense. So would you say that it took about those 2 years to test the product?
Yeah, that was also included in the process. The basic process to that was the initial conceptualization and working with the designers to come up with the parameters, which was a lot of me going back and forth and taking a look at some of those initial potential options that they could integrate into the software. And then once the framework was there, then I started bringing personnel internal to Hubbell into the equation to have them work with that software and also see if we could find the bugs in the system and try to clear those out. And then I would say in that last 6 months, right before we released it, I reached out and collected 12 different customers, and they came from either utilities or design firms, and went ahead and used them as beta testers to go ahead and make sure that these things that we'd come up with were truly indeed intuitive, easy, and stable. So it was a little bit of like a three-step phase to ultimately going through that full 2 years, with really the beta testers going through and working the software out really hard at the end.
So who would you say is the primary user for the 3D portal?
Well, ultimately, this will and is being used by utilities today, as well as design firms. And there's also the hybrids that are out there that are called packagers. And some of the packagers are large, where they end up having engineering teams besides having just their procurement teams to be able to get material, and then a construction team to build stuff later. On that front end, when they're doing the design, that's where all of these parts come into play. And so the utilities, the design firms, and some of these higher-end packagers, they go through, take these entities, these connectors that we came up with, and they build their three-dimensional virtual substation. And it really helps to be able to go through and shrink down the sizes of the substations, because the big thing that they always want to do is try to use as little real estate as possible, especially if you're someplace like in California. They're trying to put a substation right in the middle of some congested areas. They don't have very much space. So developing a 3D model of what the actual substation will look like, they can optimize all those dimensions. And then at the end of all of this, because they've put all the components into this 3D model, the software, whichever 3D program they're using, then goes through and extracts all of the entities that they have put into their design and generates them a very, very convenient bill of material. So they have an easy way to go through and know exactly what and how many parts they want to buy. And they can go through, depending upon how complex they want to be, they can figure out how much material and weight they may have, and a lot of different characteristics that they may deal with. So those really are the primary users of this.
So are there any user terms of usage like we see with other software applications?
Yeah, that was actually part of where I say that there was a development over a three-phase period. One of the big challenges on the front end of this was dealing with how do you interface with customers, and how do we track and log their entry into this application, and what have they checked out. And a really big portion is non-disclosure agreements. So a lot of time was spent with our internal legal team within Hubbell to come up with a very defined non-disclosure agreement, electronic agreement, that every time that a user enters into the software, they have to go through and say yes. It's very fast. So that had to be developed, and so the user interface, they do first go through that. They also have a very similar application process that a number of different softwares use. So they have to go through, tell us who they are, who they work for, their telephone number, their email address, and all the critical business information related to them. And once they do that, then they submit that, and Hubbell will go through and verify that they are, who they say they are, and that they are also a Hubbell customer. And that's a critical aspect too, because all of these 3D models come at a high cost to Hubbell to be able to develop. So we really cater this to Hubbell customers, not everybody. So on the front end, we had to have that login, sign up approval to know who they were, know that they were a valued Hubbell customer, make sure that they're able to sign up and agree to the usage terms. And from there, the process is very, very simple once they were in there. But so the front end, yes, looks a lot like what you would traditionally see with a lot of software today.
So now that the product has launched, what would you say has been the success of the product?
Well, the success is measured in a number of different ways, at least in my opinion. We have hundreds of people that signed up for using this easily within the first several months of releasing it. So there was a huge line of people that didn't even realize there were as many people lined up wanting in as what actually came through the electronic door, if you will. Customers really seem to enjoy it. It's exceedingly easy to go in, very simple to find the parts and download them, and the formatting is such that it really works for anybody, whatever 3D software they're using. But what I think really sets it apart is that it did something that was really unique for both our customers and then also internal to Hubbell. The thing that everybody would look at from a customer perspective, and it seems almost, intuitive that this would be the case, it gives the customer the ability to easily access, get models, whichever ones they want, any time of the day or night, do it on their time. They don't have to contact anybody. And that's a huge benefit. Easy access, no lines. But what most people don't recognize is the amount of work that is actually consumed by managing, distributing 3D models like this without having this 3D portal. Before, somebody, and that somebody would typically be a product engineer or a marketing person, would receive an email or a phone call from somebody requesting to get 3D models. And at that point, we would need to execute an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, or we would have to verify that an NDA was in existence. We would need to log that. We would need to log the date, the time, the person, the organization, and we would have to log everything that we provided them for retention. And so the software does all of that electronically behind the scenes for us. So now our product engineers and marketing personnel can spend their time doing other things besides just trying to track and dole out these 3D models. So huge time saving to allow us to be more effective internally. And I think in the long run, clearly it makes it a lot simpler for the utilities and the engineering firms because they don't have to go through design, come up with these 3D geometries, looking at 2D images, and they're able to get it instantaneously. So they saved a ton of time in this process as well.
So with such a successful product, are any new changes or improvement coming for the product?
Yeah, we're actively working down a couple of different avenues, but the number one thing that is high on our list right now, and it really was anticipated, and it was confirmed as soon as we ended up having a lot of users using this portal, and that is, well, what else? What about transmission connectors? What about insulators? What about arresters? What about a switch? So we've already gone through and started working on the infrastructure within the software to be able to start adding more products. This all started with just substation connectors, and there are thousands of connectors, so it takes a long time to be able to collect, generate, and put them in there. And plus, we needed some place to start. Now, while I am in the connector business unit, We have a switching business unit and a insulator business unit and an arrestor business unit. So a similar individual as myself is in each of these organizations, and they're all excited about the prospects of utilizing this software to branch out and include more Hubbell offerings within that.
Well, we're so excited to see the new changes and improvement to come for this product. But thank you so much, Brad, for joining us here today at PowerPods. It is really great to hear about such an innovative product that is going to help not only our organization, but also our clients.
Well, it was a pleasure.